Maya Johnson had always been the kind of person who preferred to stay in the background. She wasn't loud or flashy, and she didn't crave attention like some people did. Instead, Maya found joy in quieter things, reading books late into the night, sketching pictures that came alive on paper, and spending hours lost in thought about life's big questions. To most people, she seemed calm and unassuming, almost invisible. But what no one realized was that beneath her quiet exterior burned a fire, a strength she rarely showed, but felt deep within whenever something unfair happened. Growing up in a small town where everyone knew each other's business, Maya learned early on how to navigate tricky situations without drawing too much attention to herself. Life there wasn't easy for someone like her. As a black girl in a community dominated by people who looked nothing like her, she often felt out of place. There were moments when kids at school would tease her for being different, making fun of her hair or the way she spoke. Teachers sometimes overlooked her, assuming she wouldn't have much to contribute. And yet, through all of this, Maya held her head high. She promised herself that she'd prove them wrong someday, that she'd show the world just how capable she truly was. Years later, as an adult, Maya moved to the city to chase her dreams. She landed a job as an administrative assistant at a prestigious law firm, a place where sharp suits and polished shoes ruled the hallways. It was intimidating at first, stepping into such a competitive environment, but Maya worked hard to make a name for herself. She arrived early every morning, stayed late whenever needed, and paid close attention to details others might miss. Slowly but surely, she earned a reputation for being reliable, efficient, and smart. People began to notice her, even if only because she got things done without complaint. But despite her best efforts, Maya couldn't escape the feeling that she was constantly walking on thin ice. In meetings, her ideas were often ignored until someone else repeated them. At lunch breaks, she noticed how coworkers grouped together naturally, leaving her sitting alone more times than she cared to admit. Still, she told herself it was fine. She reminded herself that success required patience and persistence. If she could just keep pushing forward, eventually they'd see her value. One day, however, everything changed. During a team meeting, Maya presented a proposal she had spent weeks perfecting. It was thorough, well-researched, and innovative, exactly the kind of work the firm claimed to appreciate. But instead of praise, she was met with silence. Then, one of the senior partners leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said something that sent a chill down her spine. "Well," he chuckled, "I guess we can't expect everyone here to understand strategy, can we?" His tone dripped with condescension, and the comment hung heavy in the air. The room froze. No one spoke. A few people laughed nervously, unsure whether to join in or defend Maya. Others avoided eye contact altogether, pretending not to hear what had just been said. For a moment, Maya felt paralyzed. Her heart raced, and heat rose to her cheeks. She wanted to say something, to stand up and demand respect, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she forced a tight smile, nodded politely, and returned to her seat, trying to swallow the lump in her throat. Later that evening, as Maya replayed the incident over and over in her mind, anger began to replace embarrassment. What made him think he could dismiss her so casually? Why did he assume she wasn't capable of understanding strategy, or anything else for that matter? These thoughts swirled around her head like a storm, growing louder with each passing second. Deep inside, she knew this wasn't just about one rude comment. It was about years of microaggressions, subtle slights, and outright disrespect that she had endured silently for far too long. That night, lying awake in bed, Maya realized something important. They picked the wrong black girl. This man, and everyone else who underestimated her, had no idea who they were dealing with. Beneath her calm demeanor lived a warrior, waiting patiently for the right moment to rise. And now, after years of staying quiet, Maya decided it was time to let that warrior step into the light. She started small, gathering her thoughts and documenting every instance of discrimination she encountered. She wrote down dates, names, and specific incidents, creating a record that would serve as proof of what she'd been through. At first, it felt strange, almost like she was betraying her usual reserved nature, but the more she wrote, the stronger she felt. Each word became a brick in the foundation of her resolve, building toward something bigger than herself. As days turned into weeks, Maya began paying closer attention to the dynamics around her. She noticed patterns she hadn't seen before: the way certain colleagues talked over her during meetings, the dismissive glances exchanged between higher-ups when she voiced an opinion, the whispered jokes about her appearance or background. None of these things were new. She'd simply chosen to ignore them until now. But ignoring them wasn't an option anymore. Every snide remark, every sideways glance fueled the fire burning inside her, pushing her closer to action. By the end of the month, Maya had transformed. Gone was the timid woman who once shrank away from conflict. In her place stood someone determined to fight, not just for herself, but for anyone else who had ever been treated unfairly. She still carried herself with grace and dignity, but there was a newfound edge to her presence, a quiet confidence that said she was done playing by their rules. And so, as Maya prepared to take the next step in her journey, she knew one thing. For certain, this was only the beginning. The battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. They had picked the wrong black girl, and soon they'd realize exactly what that meant. The days following the meeting were some of the hardest Maya had ever faced. The comment from the senior partner lingered in her mind like an unwelcome guest, refusing to leave no matter how hard she tried to push it away. It wasn't just the words themselves that haunted her. It was the tone, the smirk, the casual cruelty behind them. Every time she replayed the moment in her head, it felt heavier, more suffocating. She couldn't shake the feeling that she'd let herself down by staying silent. At work, things didn't get better. They got worse. Her colleagues acted as though nothing had happened, pretending the incident was just another unremarkable part of their day. Some even avoided her altogether, perhaps worried they might be dragged into whatever drama they assumed was brewing. Others whispered behind her back, questioning why she hadn't laughed along or brushed off the comment like everyone else seemed to do. Their judgment stung almost as much as the original insult, because it reinforced what she feared most: that speaking up would make her look weak, emotional, or disruptive. Her superiors weren't any help either. When Maya mustered the courage to bring up the issue during a one-on-one with her manager, she was met with vague reassurances and deflection. "Oh, I'm sure he didn't mean anything by it," her boss said dismissively, barely looking up from his laptop. "You know how Mark is. He jokes around with everyone." But Maya knew better. This wasn't harmless banter. It was a calculated jab meant to remind her of her place. And yet, here she was again, being told to ignore it, to move on, to let it go. For weeks, Maya wrestled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she wanted to believe that maybe she was overreacting. Maybe this was just how things worked in high-pressure environments like the law firm: sharp tongues, thick skin, survival of the fittest. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. What happened in that meeting wasn't normal, and it certainly wasn't okay. It was a symptom of something bigger, something systemic, a culture that thrived on exclusion and oppression, where people like her were expected to endure mistreatment without complaint. Then came the breaking point. One afternoon, while grabbing coffee in the break room, Maya overheard two coworkers talking about her. At first, she thought they were discussing her recent project updates, until she caught the snickers. "Did you see her hair today?" One of them whispered, loud enough for Maya to hear, but not so loud that others might notice. "It's wild. Honestly, I don't know how HR lets her get away with it. Doesn't scream professional, does it?" Maya froze, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. Her heart pounded as shame and anger bubbled inside her chest. She had spent hours styling her natural curls that morning, taking pride in embracing her heritage and rejecting societal pressures to conform. Yet here these women were, mocking her for it, reducing her identity to something laughable, something less than human. For a brief moment she considered confronting them, demanding an explanation or apology, but instead she turned and walked out of the room, holding back tears until she reached the safety of her car. That night, sitting alone in her apartment, Maya allowed herself to cry. For the first time in years, she let the weight of everything crash over her. She cried for the little girl who had been teased at school, for the teenager who had doubted her worth, for the young woman who had worked tirelessly to prove herself only to be dismissed time and again. She cried for all the times she had swallowed her pain, burying it under layers of politeness and professionalism, hoping it would eventually fade away. But now, sitting in the dim light of her living room, she realized something profound. Swallowing. Her pain hadn't made it disappear. If anything, it had grown stronger, festering beneath the surface until it could no longer be ignored. As the tears subsided, Maya wiped her face and stared at her reflection in the window. Her eyes were red and swollen, but there was something else there too, a spark of determination she hadn't seen in a long time. She thought about her ancestors, the generations of black women who had come before her, women who had endured slavery, segregation, and countless other injustices, yet still managed to rise above. They hadn't survived those horrors just for her to sit quietly while people demeaned her existence. No, they had fought so she could live freely, boldly, unapologetically. In that moment, Maya made a promise to herself. She wouldn't let this incident define her, but she also wouldn't let it slide. She owed it to herself, to her family, to her community, to stand up and say enough was enough. They picked the wrong black girl, she thought fiercely, and they're about to find out exactly what that means. Over the next few days, Maya began transforming her pain into purpose. She started researching her rights as an employee, reading articles and watching videos about workplace discrimination. She learned about laws designed to protect workers from harassment and bias, as well as strategies for documenting incidents and filing complaints. Armed with this knowledge, she created a detailed journal where she recorded every instance of mistreatment she encountered, from dismissive comments in meetings to offhand remarks about her appearance. Each entry included dates, times, names, and descriptions, forming a clear picture of the hostile environment she had been enduring. But documenting her experiences wasn't enough. Maya knew she needed allies if she wanted to create real change. She began reaching out discreetly to other marginalized employees at the firm, sharing her story and listening to theirs. To her surprise, many of them had similar grievances, accounts of exclusion, belittlement, and outright racism that they had kept hidden out of fear or frustration. Together they formed a coalition, united by their shared desire to expose the toxic culture festering beneath the firm's polished exterior. Their meetings became a source of strength and solidarity for Maya. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen and heard. These weren't just co-workers, they were friends, confidants, warriors fighting alongside her. They brainstormed ways to hold leadership accountable, strategized about how to amplify their voices, and supported each other through moments of doubt and fear. With each passing week, Maya grew more confident, more determined, more unstoppable. Still, she couldn't ignore the risks involved. Speaking out against a powerful institution like the law firm could have serious consequences. She risked losing her job, damaging her reputation, or even facing retaliation from those in charge. Friends outside of work warned her to tread carefully, urging her to consider whether the potential fallout was worth it. But Maya had already made up her mind. Staying silent wasn't an option anymore, not when doing so meant perpetuating the very system she despised. Late one night, as she reviewed her notes and drafted plans for their next steps, Maya paused to reflect on how far she'd come. Just a few months ago, she had been content to blend into the background, avoiding conflict at all costs. Now she was leading a movement, standing tall against forces that once intimidated her. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. She had awakened a part of herself she never knew existed, a warrior willing to fight for justice, equality, and respect. And as she closed her notebook and turned off the light, she smiled softly, knowing one thing for certain. They picked the wrong black girl. and they were about to regret it. Maya's transformation from a quiet observer to a determined advocate didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process, like the first rays of dawn breaking through the darkness, a slow but steady awakening that changed everything. At first, she doubted herself constantly. Could she really take on an entire law firm? Was she brave enough to face the backlash that would inevitably come her way? These questions swirled in her mind, keeping her awake at night and making her second-guess every decision. But as she delved deeper into her research and connected with others who shared her struggles, something remarkable began to happen. Maya started believing in herself. Her journey toward empowerment began with small victories. She joined online forums and communities dedicated to workplace equality, where people shared their stories and offered advice. Reading about others who had faced similar challenges gave her hope. Some had fought back against discrimination and won. Others were still in the trenches fighting for change. Their courage inspired Maya to keep going, even when doubt crept in. She realized she wasn't alone. There was a whole network of people out there who understood what she was going through and wanted to help. One evening, while scrolling through posts in one of these forums, Maya stumbled upon a thread about documenting workplace discrimination. The advice was practical yet eye-opening. People suggested keeping detailed records of every incident, no matter how minor it seemed, and saving emails, texts, or any other evidence that could support their claims. They emphasized the importance of staying calm and professional, even when provoked, because losing composure could be used against them later. For Maya, this was a turning point. Up until then, she had been reacting emotionally, letting anger and frustration guide her actions. Now she saw the value in approaching the situation strategically, like a chess player planning several moves ahead. With newfound clarity, Maya began organizing her notes more systematically. She created spreadsheets to track each incident, categorizing them by date, type, verbal harassment, exclusionary behavior, etc., and the individuals involved. She also started saving screenshots of offensive messages and recording brief summaries of conversations immediately after they happened. This meticulous documentation not only helped her stay focused but also gave her a sense of control over a situation that had once felt completely out of her hands. As her confidence grew, so did her ambition. Maya knew she couldn't fight this battle alone, which is why she reached out to activists and organizations specializing in workplace justice. One name kept coming up in her searches: Vanessa Carter, a well-known advocate for marginalized voices in corporate settings. Vanessa had built a reputation for helping employees navigate complex legal battles and public campaigns against discriminatory employers. Intrigued, Maya sent her an email explaining her situation and asking for guidance. To Maya's surprise, Vanessa responded within hours. Her reply was warm and encouraging, filled with practical tips and resources. "You're stronger than you think," Vanessa wrote. "And you're not just fighting for yourself, you're paving the way for others who will follow in your footsteps." Those words resonated deeply with Maya. They reminded her that this wasn't just about settling scores or seeking revenge. It was about creating lasting change. With Vanessa's support, Maya began crafting a plan to expose the law firm's toxic culture without jeopardizing her own safety. Vanessa introduced Maya to a group of lawyers who specialized in employment law. These attorneys reviewed her case and helped her understand her options. They explained the legal grounds for filing a complaint and walked her through the potential outcomes of taking action. While some scenarios sounded daunting, like facing retaliation or having her character attacked in court, others offered glimmers of hope. If handled correctly, Maya's efforts could lead to significant reforms within the firm, holding leadership accountable and setting a precedent for future cases. Armed with knowledge and allies, Maya felt ready to take the next step. But before diving headfirst into confrontation, she decided to dig deeper. She wanted to uncover the full extent of the problem, not just within her department, but across the entire organization. Using her connections inside the firm, Maya discreetly reached out to former employees, asking if they'd experienced similar issues during their time there. What she discovered shocked her. Dozens of ex-workers came forward, sharing stories that painted a disturbing picture of systemic racism and sexism at the firm. Some recounted being passed over for promotions despite stellar performance reviews. Others described being subjected to racist jokes or sexist remarks during meetings. A few even mentioned instances of outright hostility, including threats and intimidation tactics used to silence dissent. Each account added another layer to the narrative Maya was building, a mosaic of injustice that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the firm's problems weren't isolated incidents, but part of a much larger pattern. With this wealth of information at her disposal, Maya realized she had the power to do something extraordinary. She could shine a light on the dark underbelly of the law firm, forcing those in charge to confront the consequences of their actions, or lack thereof. But she also knew that exposing such a powerful institution wouldn't be easy. It would require careful planning, unwavering determination, and nerves of steel. And so Maya began preparing for what lay ahead. She spent countless hours drafting letters, gathering evidence, and rehearsing speeches. She practiced talking points with Vanessa and the coalition members, refining her arguments until they were sharp and unshakable. She visualized different scenarios, imagining how executives might respond and strategizing ways to counter their defenses. Every detail mattered, from the tone of her voice to the timing of her revelations. This wasn't just a campaign. It was a mission, and Maya intended to execute it flawlessly. Throughout this process, Maya drew strength from the stories of her ancestors. She thought about her grandmother, who had marched alongside civil rights activists in the 1960s, risking arrest and violence to demand equal treatment. She remembered her mother, who had worked tirelessly to provide for her family despite facing discrimination in her own career. These women had endured hardships Maya could barely imagine, yet they never gave up. They taught her that resilience wasn't just about surviving. It was about thriving no matter the odds. Inspired by their legacy, Maya vowed to carry the torch forward. She wouldn't let fear dictate her choices or hold her back from doing what was right. Yes, the road ahead would be challenging, and yes, she might face resistance at every turn. But she was prepared to meet those challenges head-on, armed with truth, courage, and an unshakable belief in the power of justice. By the time Maya finished laying the groundwork for her campaign, she was a different person. Gone was the timid assistant who had once shrank away from conflict. In her place stood a warrior, a woman unafraid to challenge authority, speak her truth, and fight for what she believed in. She still carried herself with grace and dignity, but there was a fierceness in her eyes now, a quiet intensity that said she was done playing by their rules. Looking back on her journey, Maya marveled at how far she'd come. From the moment she overheard those hurtful comments in the break room to the countless late nights spent strategizing with her coalition, every step had brought her closer to this pivotal moment. She had awakened a part of herself she never knew existed, a side that refused to back down, no matter how intimidating the opposition. And as she prepared to launch her campaign, Maya smiled softly, knowing one thing for certain. They picked the wrong black girl, and now the world was about to see exactly what that meant. Maya knew that taking on the law firm alone would be like trying to move a mountain with her bare hands. She needed help, and not just any help. She needed people who understood the weight of what she was fighting for and were willing to stand beside her. Building an army wasn't just about gathering allies, it was about creating a community of voices united by shared experiences and a common goal. For Maya, this step was crucial. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about all the others who had been silenced, dismissed, or pushed aside. The first person Maya approached was Lisa, a co-worker in the accounting department. Lisa was quiet but observant, and Maya had noticed how often she seemed uncomfortable during team meetings. One afternoon, after everyone else had left the office, Maya knocked on Lisa's cubicle wall. "Hey, do you have a minute?" she asked, softly holding a folder filled with notes and documents. Lisa looked up, surprised but nodded. Over coffee in the break room, Maya shared her story. The comment from the senior partner, the whispers about her hair, the dismissive attitudes, and explained what she was planning to do. At first, Lisa hesitated. "Are you sure about this?" she asked cautiously. "What if they come after us?" Maya smiled, though there was steel in her voice. "They already are," she said. "But I'm done letting them win. We can either stay silent and let it keep happening, or we can fight back together." Something in Maya's words resonated with Lisa, and after a long pause, she nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'm in." With Lisa on board, Maya felt a surge of confidence. Together, they began reaching out to other employees who might feel the same way. They started small, talking to people one-on-one during lunch breaks or after work hours. Each conversation followed a similar pattern. Maya would share her story, listen to theirs, and then gently ask if they'd be willing to join the coalition. Some were hesitant at first, afraid of retaliation or unsure if they could make a difference. But as more people opened up, a powerful realization began to take hold. They weren't alone. One of the most impactful moments came when Marcus, a junior associate, joined the group. Marcus was well-liked and respected within the firm, which made his decision to speak out even more significant. During a coalition meeting held in a dimly lit cafe near the office, he recounted an experience that mirrored Maya's own. A few months earlier, he had pitched an idea during a brainstorming session only to have it ignored, until a white colleague repeated it verbatim later in the meeting and received praise. "It's exhausting," Marcus admitted, his voice heavy with frustration. "You start doubting yourself, wondering if maybe you're the problem. But then you realize it's not you. It's them." Hearing Marcus's story strengthened the group's resolve. They weren't just individuals fighting isolated battles. They were part of something bigger, a collective force determined to dismantle the toxic culture that had plagued the firm for years. As the coalition grew, so did their strategy. They divided responsibilities based on each member's strengths. Lisa, with her meticulous attention to detail, took charge of organizing evidence and compiling data. Marcus used his connections within the firm to gather insider information, while Maya focused on crafting their message and planning their next moves. But building an army wasn't just about recruiting members. It was also about finding external support. Maya reached out to Vanessa Carter again, asking if she could connect them with organizations specializing in workplace advocacy. Vanessa didn't disappoint. She introduced the coalition to a nonprofit called Equity Forward, which provided resources and training for marginalized workers seeking justice. Through Equity Forward, Maya and her team learned how to amplify their voices using social media, draft press releases, and navigate potential legal challenges. Social media became a key part of their strategy. Maya created an anonymous Twitter account where she began sharing snippets of their experiences at the firm. The posts were carefully worded, not inflammatory, but undeniable in their truth. One tweet read, "When your ideas are ignored until someone else repeats them," or workplace equality, enough is enough. Another said, "Professionalism doesn't mean erasing who you are. My natural hair is beautiful, and it belongs in this space. Representation matters." The response was overwhelming. Within days, the tweets gained traction, sparking conversations online about discrimination in corporate environments. Former employees of the law firm started chimeling in, sharing their own stories and validating everything Maya and her coalition were saying. Journalists began reaching out, eager to learn more about the allegations. Suddenly, the firm's carefully curated image of professionalism and inclusivity was under scrutiny, and Maya's little coalition was at the center of it all. As momentum built outside the firm, tensions inside began to rise. Whispers spread through the hallways, and some co-workers avoided eye contact with Maya and her allies, unsure of what to say or do. Others, however, stepped forward to offer their support. Sarah, a paralegal who had once kept her distance, pulled Maya aside one afternoon. "I've seen the things you're talking about," she confessed. "I didn't say anything before because I was scared, but I want to help now." Her words brought tears to Maya's eyes. not because she was surprised, but because it reminded her why they were doing this. Every new ally reinforced the fact that change was possible. Still, not everyone was supportive. Some colleagues dismissed the coalition's efforts as divisive or unnecessary, accusing them of stirring up trouble where none existed. Others accused Maya of playing the race card or seeking attention. These criticisms hurt, but they also fueled her determination. "If they think we're causing trouble," she told the group during one of their meetings, "then we must be doing something right." To prepare for what lay ahead, the coalition held regular strategy sessions. They rehearsed responses to potential pushback from leadership, discussed ways to protect themselves legally, and planned how to escalate their campaign if necessary. Maya encouraged everyone to focus on the bigger picture. "This isn't just about us," she reminded them. "It's about making sure no one else has to go through what we've been through. That's worth fighting for." As the weeks passed, Maya watched her team transform. What had started as a handful of hesitant individuals had grown into a united front, a group of warriors ready to take on whatever came their way. They still faced challenges, of course. Fear lingered in the background and doubts occasionally crept in. But every time someone wavered, another stepped up to remind them why they were doing this. Together, they found strength in vulnerability, courage in unity, and hope in action. By the time they finalized their plan, Maya knew they were ready. The coalition had become more than just a group of co-workers. It was a family bound by shared pain and purpose. And as Maya looked around the room at the faces of her fellow fighters, she felt a deep sense of pride. They had awakened something powerful within themselves, something that couldn't be silenced or ignored. They picked the wrong black girl, Maya thought to herself, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. And now, they're about to meet an entire army. The coalition was ready. Months of planning, strategizing, and gathering evidence had led them to this moment. It was time to strike, not with chaos or recklessness, but with precision and purpose. Maya knew that the first move would set the tone for everything that followed, so she wanted it to be bold yet calculated. They needed to send a message loud enough to shake the foundations of the law firm, but clear enough to ensure no one could ignore their cause. The weapon they chose? An anonymous blog post. Late one evening, after everyone else had left the office, Maya sat at her desk with a steaming cup of tea beside her. Her laptop screen glowed softly in the dim light as she opened a blank document. This wasn't just any piece of writing. It was the culmination of sleepless nights, whispered conversations, and countless hours spent poring over documents and testimonies. Every word mattered. She started typing, her fingers moving steadily across the keyboard, as if guided by something greater than herself. The blog post began with a simple question. What does professionalism really mean? From there, Maya laid out the truth, unfiltered, unapologetic, and undeniable. She described the culture of exclusion and discrimination that thrived within the firm's polished walls. She shared anonymized stories from former employees who had been passed over for promotions, mocked for their appearance, or outright belittled during meetings. She included screenshots of offensive messages, emails dismissing valid concerns, and even photos of segregated seating arrangements at company events, where marginalized employees were subtly pushed to the edges. But most importantly, she framed it all around a central theme: silence only empowers injustice. When she finished drafting the post, Maya read it aloud to the coalition during their next meeting. The room fell silent as each member absorbed the weight of what they were about to unleash. Lisa wiped away tears, while Marcus nodded approvingly. "This is powerful," he said finally. "It's not accusatory. It's factual. People won't be able to dismiss this." With everyone's approval, Maya published the post under an anonymous username late that night. By morning, it had gone viral. Within hours, thousands of people had read it, shared it, and commented on it. Former employees of the firm flooded social media with their own accounts, adding fuel to the fire. Hashtags like Expose the Firm and Justice at Work began trending nationwide. Journalists scrambled to investigate, reaching out to current and past employees for interviews. What started as a single voice speaking into the void quickly became a roar that couldn't be ignored. Back at the office, panic set in almost immediately. Executives huddled in emergency meetings trying to figure out who had leaked the information and how much damage control would cost. Employees walked on eggshells, unsure whether to distance themselves from the scandal or align with the growing movement. Some managers attempted to downplay the allegations, insisting they were exaggerated or taken out of context. Others tried to intimidate those suspected of involvement, warning them about the consequences of rocking the boat. But none of it worked. The story had already escaped their grasp. For Maya and her coalition, watching the fallout unfold was both exhilarating and terrifying. On one hand, they felt vindicated knowing their message was resonating far beyond the firm's walls. On the other hand, they braced themselves for retaliation. Rumors spread that leadership was compiling lists of troublemakers to target. Security tightened around certain areas of the building, and some team members reported being called into impromptu meetings with HR. Despite these pressures, the coalition remained steadfast. They reminded each other why they were doing this, not for revenge but for justice. As the days turned into weeks, the situation escalated further. National news outlets picked up the story, running headlines like, "Top law firm accused of systemic racism and sexism," and the employees speak out against toxic workplace culture. Reporters dug deeper, uncovering additional scandals hidden beneath the firm's pristine image. It turned out that several high-ranking executives had histories of discriminatory behavior, including lawsuits settled quietly out of court. One journalist even obtained internal memos showing how diversity initiatives had been repeatedly defunded, despite public promises to prioritize inclusion. The revelations sent shockwaves through the legal community. Competitors distanced themselves from the firm, clients threatened to withdraw business, and industry watchdogs demanded accountability. For the first time in its history, the once revered institution found itself on shaky ground. And yet, leadership still refused to take full responsibility. Instead, they issued vague statements condemning any form of prejudice and promised to review their policies. A classic case of saying the right words without taking meaningful action. Maya watched all of this unfold with a mix of satisfaction and frustration. While it was gratifying to see the firm's hypocrisy exposed, she knew empty promises wouldn't cut it anymore. The world was watching now, and the pressure was mounting. People expected real change, not just lip service. So when reporters began contacting her anonymously via encrypted messages, Maya decided it was time to escalate the campaign. She drafted a second blog post, this one more pointed than the last. Titled, "Words Aren't Enough." It called out the firm's hollow responses and outlined specific demands. Among them were mandatory bias training for all staff, transparent hiring and promotion practices, and the establishment of an independent oversight committee to address future complaints. The post ended with a chilling reminder. "We've shown you what happens when voices unite. If you choose to ignore us again, we'll make sure the world never forgets your name." Once again, the reaction was explosive. Supporters praised Maya's courage, calling her an inspiration for marginalized workers everywhere. Critics accused her of being too harsh, arguing that drastic measures weren't necessary. But Maya didn't care about pleasing everyone. Her goal wasn't to win popularity contests, it was to hold the firm accountable. And judging by the growing number of allies joining her cause, she was succeeding. Internally, tensions reached a breaking point. Employees divided into factions, those who supported the coalition and those who sided with management. Arguments erupted in hallways and productivity plummeted as everyone focused more on gossip than work. Even clients noticed the dysfunction, with some openly questioning whether the firm could continue operating effectively. For Maya, this was proof that their strategy was working. The firm's carefully constructed facade was crumbling, revealing the rot underneath. Despite the chaos, Maya refused to lose sight of her ultimate objective. She reminded the coalition daily that their fight wasn't just about dismantling the firm, it was about rebuilding it into something better. "We're not here to destroy," she told them during one particularly heated discussion. We're here to transform, to create a space where everyone feels valued, respected, and heard. That's the legacy we're fighting for. By the end of the month, the firm's leadership had no choice but to act. Several senior executives resigned amid internal investigations, citing personal reasons. Others were placed on leave pending further review. Meanwhile, sweeping reforms were announced, including new diversity initiatives, revamped grievance procedures, and commitments to transparency. While Maya acknowledged these changes were just the beginning, she couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. She and her coalition had forced one of the most powerful institutions in the country to reckon with its flaws, and the world was watching every step of the way. Still, Maya knew the battle wasn't over. Change wouldn't happen overnight, and vigilance would be key to ensuring promises translated into action. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. Looking back on everything they'd accomplished, from the first anonymous tweet to the global outcry, they had proven one thing beyond a shadow of a doubt. They picked the wrong black girl and awakened a warrior who refused to back down.